Welcome into another Friday edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. Purdue will make history when they take the field Saturday night in Columbus against Ohio State, but not really the good kind. Meanwhile, men's basketball captured its first win of the season, and they're back in action for game number 2 tonight, this time against the Norse of Northern Kentucky. We're going to talk about both football and hoops in this latest edition of BGR. But first, Gold and Black Radio tonight is brought to you by our friends at Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics, and the official credit card for Purdue fans, Boiler Up, East End Grill and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. And our friends at the Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. Let's bring on another friend in Tom Dienhart of GoldandBlack.com. And Tom, a second time in a couple of weeks here that Purdue has been in an overtime game, but once again, they end up falling short in their best and likely their last chance to win this season. There were other decisions over the course of the game that went wrong. I don't want to just hyper-focus on one, and who knows, maybe Purdue kicks the field goal, they make it, and Northwestern still takes two plays to get in the end zone and win the game. But did passing up that field goal chance, did that stick with you at all this week? Because it felt universally like people felt like that was the wrong decision.
Yeah, it did. It kind of, I think maybe it's an overstatement by me, but in some ways it kind of undid a lot of the good that we saw, I think, last Saturday. For once, Derek, there were some positive things throughout the entirety of a game against Northwestern. They came back from a 17-3 deficit. The defense sort of showed some backbone in the second half. The offense went down and scored a touchdown late, tied the game. So there were some positives there. And then it all kind of came undone, I think, with that decision. 4th and 6 to eschew the 37, 38-yard field goal because the ball was on the wrong hash mark. Again, I think it's dubious, and 4th and 6 is a lot different than 4th and 1, obviously. And I know Spencer Porath is still a true freshman. I think he's 1 for 3 from beyond 30 yards, but still, I would have rather taken a chance and let him try to kick that ball, at least give Purdue a lead and put a little pressure on Northwestern.
Yeah, and I think coaches tend to overthink it. I mean, I don't really care if it's the hash, a wind, an earthquake. It's a 38-yard field goal, and last time I checked, Spencer Porath is on scholarship, correct? So if you have a scholarship kicker in the Big Ten, it's a 38-yard field goal. Like, to me, if he misses it, you can live with that result, whereas going for a 4th and 6 as opposed to a 4th and 1 or a 4th and 2, and if we're playing the probabilities, Tom, I mean, I'd have to imagine the chances are, even with a true freshman kicker, probabilities are higher that field goal is going to be good than the 4th and 6 is going to be converted, because there's no guarantee that you get the touchdown there either.
Yeah, plus you're on your home field too, right?
Yeah.
And Northwestern reeling a little bit. And then, of course, after the 4th down attempt is missed, Derek, there was a penalty on Northwestern that backed their possession up to the 40-yard line, seemingly really putting them behind the sticks in a lot of different ways. Didn't matter. They scored in 2 plays, right? Game over just like that, in a snap of the fingers. So that was disappointing. Earlier in the game, Derek, we saw one instance where Purdue didn't accept the penalty to push Northwestern back, and they subsequently kicked a field goal. That was another decision that was been widely debated by Monday morning quarterbacks too. So, yeah, I think they let one get away, my friend. I think we all can agree upon that. A win that was very much needed. We all realize that too. Now, as you mentioned from the jump here, Derek, their last best opportunity for a win is by the boards. Now they're staring at 4 games, and 3 of those games, my friend, are against teams currently ranked in the AP top 10, starting with this junket to Columbus to play the number 3 team in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes.
I guess at least you have the quarterback situation figured out, at least for this week, right? I guess we shouldn't talk in absolutes with the way that this season has gone, but Hudson Card reverting back to that true QB1 role, which I think, Tom, you and I would agree is the right decision. I understand letting Ryan Brown continue after Illinois for a game, but I really thought that should have ended last week. Problem for Hudson Card is now you're rewarded by getting your starting job fully back, and it's the best defense in the Big Ten on the road, right?
Yeah. Speaking of how they handled the quarterbacks last week, there was that plan. Hudson was going to play the first 2 series. Ryan was going to get the next 2 series. And then they were going to decide who was going to be the QB moving forward. Well, boy, Hudson looked pretty good those first 2 series. Why not scrap that plan and continue riding Hudson Card? Obviously, that didn't happen. who knows how maybe that would have changed circumstances last Saturday. But that's in our rearview mirror, right, Derek? Mm-hmm. That was a storyline Monday at the press conference. How were the quarterbacks going to be handled starting this week? Ryan Walters said Hudson's the guy, like you said, but there's still a plan to use Ryan if there's a circumstance on the field during the course of the game where his package of plays could be utilized to put Purdue in a good advantage to have some positive plays. So the door's not closed on us seeing Ryan Brown. And why not, right? He does have a nice skill set. I'd like to see him brought in maybe in the red zone on 3rd and 1, on 4th and 2, just to give Purdue another look and yet something else for the Ohio State defense to have to contend with.
Yeah, in two areas where they struggled, right? Red zone offense and short yardage, where I think Brown can bring some things to the table that maybe Card can't as well. Speaking of positives, I know you had the chance to talk to him early in the week for an article on GoldandBlack.com, and he had the drop, right? But early impressions-wise, what did you think of C.J. Smith's debut?
Yeah, I thought he did pretty well given the fact that he hadn't played a snap really in a game going back to 2023, and even back at Georgia, he wasn't the main player. So a lot of rust. He talked about that this week. Ryan Walters talked about that this week. You know, he hurt that hamstring really early in training camp, Derek. I asked him this week. I couldn't remember exactly when he got hurt. So that was early on in camp. He missed most of camp. He said he almost got on the field for the Oregon State game, had a setback for that game on September 21st. And we saw him dress out against Oregon a couple weeks ago. Didn't play. And finally, we saw the debut. And you're right, boy, what if he makes that catch on the first play? But he still had 4 catches for 55 yards. We saw some of the flashes of speed that we've heard so much about. Confident kid. He's a big kid, Derek. I tell you what, he's a guy that's going to be fun to watch and moving forward here. I like that wide receiver combination with him and Jamal Edgerrin. I think those are two pretty good targets for Hudson Card.
Yeah, no question about that. We'll talk more with Tom here in just a second, but first wanted to also bring in a couple more of our sponsors to thank for this week's edition of Gold and Black Radio, including Sand Valley Resort. Celebrate all that the wilderness provides this fall and winter at Sand Valley. Experience everything from Thanksgiving dinner, curling and ice hockey to ice fishing and snowshoeing, and even the restorative benefits of a guided cold plunge in the frozen lake. Start planning your next winter getaway by visiting sandvalleypursuits.com. And our friends at the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. They have a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermaker scientists from all across the university, conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. Tom, playing out the string, right? Purdue, if we're being honest, they've been playing out the string for a while now, with a couple of games left here, and unfortunately against some real top-end teams. I mean, national playoff contenders, not only Ohio State, but also, you've got Indiana at the end of the year as well. In the portal era, regardless of what happens, you have to kind of re-recruit these guys anyway. But is there anything that Purdue can do in these final couple of games to help their cause? Or is it, you're going to have to do whatever you're going to have to do to try to keep who you can keep?
I think you just have to look competitive, right?
Yeah.
I think everybody realizes the mountain that Purdue's facing here down the stretch against the Buckeyes. Penn State comes to West Lafayette next. Then they trek up to East Lansing to play a plucky Spartan squad. And, of course, there's the finale down in Bloomington against an IU team that may be trying to, punch their ticket to a college football playoff spot. Who knows? So, again, it's a steep mountain. Purdue's going to be a decided underdog here in all 4 of these games. And like I said, people ask me, well, how can you really measure success for Purdue, given what they've already shown us this year? And given the opponents that they're facing, what's success going to look like for Purdue? Like I said, maybe it's to beating the spread, Derek. It's looking competent. It's looking organized. It's playing hard all 4 quarters and doing all you can just to stay in the game. I mean, that sounds like a very low bar and a low level of expectations. But again, given the cocktail that I talked about, how Purdue's looked, the schedule they're playing, I mean, boy, to expect victory in any of these 4 games, I think, maybe folly, but who knows? Maybe we'll see some surprises along the way. And really, Derek, a surprise would be if any of these games are really still up for grabs when you get in the second half, especially in the 4th quarter.
And they have had a knack for surprising the Buckeyes over the years. Unfortunately, pretty much all those surprises have been at Ross-Ade. 1988, The last time that Purdue was able to win in Columbus, which was one of the worst years in Ohio State's modern football history. But you had the chance to talk to Bill Rabinowitz, and we're going to play that Know Your Opponent coming up here in just a little bit. But Tom will bring you back on to go around the rest of the Big Ten later on in the show, buddy.
Thank you, my friend.
That's our friend Tom Dienard. And like I said, Tom had the chance to talk to Bill Rabinowitz, who has been covering Buckeye football for a long, long time for the Columbus Dispatch, to get the opponent view. And here's this week's look at the Buckeyes of Ohio State, Purdue's opponent this week at the Horseshoe.
All right. Great to have Bill Rabinowitz of the Columbus Dispatch join us to drop some Ohio State Buckeye knowledge on us. Of course, the Boilermakers will matriculate east to Columbus, Ohio for a noon kickoff on Saturday against the mighty Buckeyes. Bill, welcome, thanks, and let's jump right in. Tell our viewers and listeners what they can expect from the Ohio State offense on Saturday.
Well, the big question going into the Penn State game was whether the offensive line would hold up. They lost both their top left tackles. The big one was losing Josh Simmons, who was playing really well. They lost him in the Oregon game, and the line had really struggled. And that was the big question with the offense. They moved Donovan Jackson, the left guard, to left tackle, moved Carson Hinsman, who was the starting center last year and was a backup this year, to left guard. And the line played pretty well against Penn State. Jackson got beat a couple times by Abdul Carter, which is going to happen when you go against Abdul Carter. But the line in the last 5 minutes of the game just bowled Penn State. 10 plays, almost 60 yards to clinch the game. Will Howard has played well at quarterback. Last week was his worst game. He threw a pick six and also fumbled at the goal line. Cost him 14 points there. But generally, he's been solid. You know, he's not C.J. Stroud. He doesn't have that kind of arm, but he's a better runner. He's very accurate on short and medium passes. And of course, he's got tons of weapons around him. Travion Henderson and Quinson Judkins in the backfield. Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, the phenom freshman, and Carnell Tate at wide receiver. So they're loaded. Chip Kelly's now calling the plays. I thought he called his best game against Penn State, some misdirection stuff. So it's an offense that when it's clicking is pretty unstoppable.
Yeah, Bill, it's going to be a steep hill for Purdue to climb. You probably saw the early line.
36 or something like that. Something like that, right?
I saw 38 and a half, but maybe it's going down a little bit. But
yeah.
Would be an all-time high for Purdue. So, again, same story, different year. A lot of talent in Columbus. What about the defensive side of the ball? How do the Buckeyes look over there, Bill?
Yeah, that was an impressive performance on Saturday. The only touchdown Penn State scored was on a pick six. So the defense only gave up two field goals. The big sequence was the goal line stand. Penn State had the ball down 20-13 with 10 minutes to go at the Ohio State 3. And for whatever reason, James Franklin's getting a lot of heat about this, but Penn State ran the ball 3 times up the middle, 4th and goal at the 1. They attempted a pass. There was a lot of Ohio State defenders in the end zone, and the pass fell incomplete. That was the big sequence, but they really did a nice job against the run. They really held Nick Singleton and Katron Allen to like 2 point something yards per carry. Weren't really hurt much in the passing game. Penn State kind of dinks and dunks down the field anyway, and that's what they had to do. It's a defense really without any major holes. They're really strong up front. JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer were expected to kind of have huge years. Statistically, they haven't, but they're still really good players. JT in particular played really well on Saturday. Cody Simon has settled in at linebacker. He's a fifth-year senior. He's the captain. He's played very well. The corners have been shaky, surprisingly shaky, but both of them played well. Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun played well against Penn State. Igbinosun is very handsy. In fact, coaches put oven mitts on him in practice last week to keep him from being so handsy. He played well. He had a pick in the end zone at the end of the first half. That was huge. Denzel Burke had a terrible game against Oregon, just an awful game, but he's bounced back the last 2 weeks. The best player on the defense is Caleb Downs. He's the transfer from Alabama, sophomore, All-American last year as a freshman, led Alabama in tackles last year as a freshman. He hasn't had like the amazing, pick six where he weaves through players or anything like that. But I tell you, he just triggers on the ball so fast. There are times when you see a handoff or a quick pass, you think, okay, there's a hole there. And Caleb Downs just diagnoses it and makes the tackle. They got Lathan Ransom back last week. He missed the Nebraska game. So it's a really solid defense.
Yeah, a lot of talent on that side of the ball. And Bill, a big win, like you said last week, for the Buckeyes. We all know it's national championship or bust for that squad in 2024. At least it appears to be.
Right.
Okay, so how do you see this game unfolding Saturday? Again, we know Purdue's a heavy underdog.
Yeah.
Will the Buckeyes cover that number? Will the Buckeyes sleepwalk through this thing? The Boilers have not won over there, Bill, since 1988. I'm not sure where you were in 1988, but that's a long time ago, buddy.
What was it? I was at my first job out of school. How about that? That's a long time ago. The only chance Purdue has is if Ohio State does have a major letdown, or if they're just a fluky game with a bunch of turnovers, or maybe, God forbid, Will Howard gets hurt or something like that. But on paper, it's a mismatch, and I think anyone's trying to pretend otherwise is pretending otherwise. So, Purdue at times, especially there, it's been a house of horrors in West Lafayette. In Columbus, not so much. There was the famous 2012 game, the undefeated season for Ohio State. That was the closest call Ohio State had. They had to come back with a backup quarterback to win in overtime. I would be shocked if that happens this week.
Yeah, probably going to be a fun afternoon for Buckeye fans to kick their feet back and enjoy this one. Maybe hit their tailgates early, Bill. But we'll see. It would be an epic upset if it did happen. So I look forward to seeing you. Look forward to coming your way for the ball game. Always a great venue, great atmosphere, Bill. Thank you very much for stopping by, my friend.
Always nice to be on with you, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks so much to Bill Rabinowitz for joining us for this week's opponent view of the Buckeyes. And as the Boilers make the trip to the Horseshoe, what's the weather looking like for tomorrow's contest? Here's the latest from WLFI meteorologist David Seipel.
Hello from News 18. I'm Storm Team 18 meteorologist David Seipel. The Boilermakers are taking on Ohio State in Columbus, Ohio, with a kickoff time around noon. If you plan on heading east for some early morning tailgating, plan to dress warm, as temperatures will be in the upper 30s with sunny skies. Winds will be light in the morning at around 3 miles per hour out of the east. By kickoff, temperatures will be around 56 degrees with mostly sunny skies and an easterly wind of 5 to 10 miles per hour. During the game, we'll have increasing clouds, but no rain will be expected. High temperatures will occur right around the end of the game, which will be around 60 degrees. Rain is likely overnight into Sunday in Columbus. Overall, expect a nice fall-like day with sunny skies for some Boilermaker football. From News 18, I'm Storm Team 18 meteorologist David Seipel. Boiler up, hammer down.
I know nobody wants to hear it during a 1-7 season, but this feels like about the best fall weather that we've had here in the 20 years that I've been in Indiana. Most mild, and these game day forecasts mostly have been really, really good for Purdue, not just at home, but also on the road. The problem is that they're losing a lot of them. So, that and $5 gets you, a bucket of candy, I guess. GoldandBlack.com is where if you want to spend your $5, you could do so and be a subscriber. Analysis reports, shows like this one, Knucklehead Central. You get it all at GoldandBlack.com. Subscribe today. You also get our next guest in basketball analyst Brian Neubert and columnist. He joins us now to the stage. And Brian was my featured guest on the Tuesday edition of the show from Mackey Arena, which was pretty cool to soak in the ambiance of Mackey while we did the show. You released your, I'm trying to think of the word here. What is it? Terrifying predictions? Scared predictions? Fearful. Yes, fearful. Fearful predictions this week. This is just for fun. I want to make sure that everybody knows this so they don't come back and dig up this audio again. But I'll be honest, the one that really jumped out to me, 26 wins, 3 seeds, Sweet 16. I'd happily sign up for that right now. I really would. I think you take a lot of unknowns out of the equation here for Purdue.
Yeah, you must buy your candy after Halloween if you're only spending $5 a bag. I somehow got sent to the store to get our Halloween candy this year and dropped like $60. I don't know how that happened, but that's what they get for sending me. I think I put Purdue at like 26 wins. The way I normally just calculate that, it's not really a science. I just think okay, this team is a such and such number of win level of team, and then I go through the schedule to make sure it makes sense. So it's not like I went through every game and I said, all right, in March, I think Purdue is going to win this game by this many points. So they just feel like a 26-win Sweet 16 team to me, and I think they've got so much continuity going for them here, and the Big Ten is such an unknown that I think the team with experience and continuity is really going to have an advantage, and the possibility certainly exists that like 4 teams are going to share the Big Ten championship now because there's so many single play opponents. So that's going to give Purdue a pretty good shot too to share it, not necessarily win it outright the way they have the last couple of years, but I don't think that was all going out on all that much of a limb there.
Raleigh Burgess getting double-digit minutes might be a little bit going out on a limb, but I know that the staff really likes him, and they've decided not to redshirt him, and that's another one that jumped out to me. What makes you feel confident about that?
I just think he's going to pass people up. I just think he's a really high-energy guy. He can help him on the glass. He's versatile enough to play both positions, the 4 and the 5. Trey Kaufman-Renn can't play them both at once, so when Purdue doesn't have a 7-footer on the floor at center, Kaufman-Renn, I think, ultimately is going to find his way into some minutes there. And then that would open up the 4. Camden Heide obviously would be a possibility there. Caleb First would be a possibility there as well. But I think Burgess can really help them there too. I just think his energy, his rebounding, his positional size if he's at the 5, his shooting if he's at the 4 or the 5, I guess, are things that Purdue will really look at incorporating more and more as the season goes on, as he gets better and better, more and more comfortable. And you can't tell me that when you like a player this much and you make a decision mutually to not redshirt him, that there's not some impulse on some level to get him some minutes any way possible. That could mean blowout minutes, but those count toward the average I mentioned. But those also mean rotational minutes, and I think Purdue's got some older guys that perhaps may not have their whole futures ahead of them at Purdue, that when all things are equal, go with the younger guy, get him some experience. Now, you do whatever you need to do to win the game you're playing in, but there's going to be situations. There are situations every year where there are some discretionary minutes that can be handed out, and I'd imagine Purdue might kind of lean toward Raleigh Burgess in some of those situations.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see those bench roles and how all that gets sorted. And we talked about this on Tuesday's show too, about sort of the hot and cold nature of some of these bench guys where, like you saw it in the opener, right? Some nights you're going to need Miles Colvin, and some nights you're not going to need Cam Heide. And then other nights you're going to really have to lean on Heide, right, for the rebounding and everything else. And maybe you're not going to need Colvin. And I think for, in a lot of different places other than Matt Painter's program, coaches would be squeamish about that, right? Because in the transfer portal era, you want to have like these guaranteed defined roles for these guys. And I think Purdue can kind of get away with that because of the buy-in that these guys have in what Matt Painter's selling.
Well, this is kind of a whole new team. So the important part of that is that this team exhibits some of those things that past teams have too. I mean, this will be the first time in Jakari Harris's life. This will be the first time in Raleigh Burgess's life. This will be the first time, certainly, in Miles Colvin. Well, he did last year, but he was a freshman last year, so it could be easily explained off. But there are going to be guys coming into this program now who've always been the best players on their teams who now have to do some of those things that the Mason Gillises did and the Trey Kaufman-Renns did before and the Caleb Firsts have done their whole career, basically. And that can go a lot of different ways on you. It just so happens Purdue's done a great job getting the right guys, establishing a certain selflessness in those guys. And, I hate using the word culture because it's just a buzzword, but that's really what it is. But it has to be passed down from generation to generation. And you still have to see how some of these guys who maybe their seasons aren't quite going the way they envision them going, they still have to handle that well. And they still have to be ready. That's the thing, and this is going to be a test for Ollie Burgess too. It's like there might be a game he plays 2 minutes, and there might be the next game they might need him for 20. Is he able mentally, physically, whatever it might be, to give them 20 good minutes, or is he going to still be kind of spaced out from only playing 2 before? I'm not making that a Raleigh Burgess specific concern. I'm just saying that's a general thing with players, is being ready to play when maybe you aren't is not an easy thing to do.
I don't want to overlook, Northern Kentucky's been a really good program. I think they've won that Horizon League has always been one of the top mid-major leagues, and I think they've won it 3 or 4 times. And then you've got Yale, who's been one of the class programs of the Ivy League for a long time. So, I don't want to be look-ahead guy, but now I'm going to be look-ahead guy. A week from now is the first real big test of the season with Alabama, and then you kind of shoot right into it, right? Marquette after that. You've got the Big Ten openers now starting in December, which I hate, but you've got that. NC State, I think, is in that mix as well. How important is it to? I know we're talking about 2 or 3 games here; it's a small sample, but to lay a little bit of groundwork and kind of maybe not clearly define roles, Brian, because I think that'll be a sort of a fluid situation, but define yourself a little bit here before you really have to start to hit the ground running, because not all of these non-conference schedules are created equal.
Yeah, I think that this is going to be as process-oriented a season as Purdue has had in a while. I'll take you back to the 2019 team, which I can draw a lot of parallels with this team to that team. That team didn't win a high major game in non-conference play, and then dominated the Big Ten and damn near went to the Final Four. I think there's some parallels, again, to be struck with that team. But I think in terms of the non-conference season, I think there's going to be some ups and downs, because there are some things here with this team that really need to be ironed out. And anytime you're playing 4 freshmen in your rotation, there's going to be things to be ironed out. But you're also moving guys around to different positions. You're also asking more of your best players than they had to do last year. You're asking them to do different things. Trey Kaufman-Renn is now your second most important decision maker offensively. Everybody's got to rebound more than they did last year. The defensive cohesion has to get better. Braden Smith has to carry a lot more weight. Fletcher Lawyer has to carry a lot more weight. And there's going to be some ups and downs here. There's just no way around it. The fact that Purdue hasn't lost a game in November since 2020, that's not normal. And I think the first time Purdue loses a game in November, that could be next Friday night for all we know. It's going to be a shock to people's systems, because they've just not seen it in years. And they didn't see it in person last time it happened, because it was during COVID. So I think, losing early in the season can make you better later in the season. It just so happens that Purdue hasn't done it. Now, it did get the Creighton loss out of the way. That doesn't count. So I'm not even going to mention that. But there are going to be some ups and downs. And I think, Purdue needs to be better. The downs now need to lead to ups later. And I think that's kind of happened in some ways in the last couple of years, even though they haven't lost a game in November.
Yeah, so they won't win every single preseason tournament is what you're saying, and beat every ranked opponent that they play.
At some point, somebody's going to beat them. Yeah. Yeah. I've said that 3 years in a row, though. So
it has been an incredible run. Look, I know people are like, well, it's all about March or whatever. Look, it's neat. I mean, I think they've beaten Gonzaga like 4 times in the last, 3 or 4 Novembers and Decembers as well. So it's just been cool that they've been on this stretch here, which we know eventually is going to end eventually with a loss. We'll incorporate a lot more basketball talk, obviously, into the Friday show and into the Tuesday show as well. But, Brian, we'll bring you back to talk a little Big Ten football coming up later on in the show. Appreciate it as always.
No problem, Derek.
It's our pal Brian Neubert, and want to thank some of our other pals at the Whitaker Inn. The Midwestern Oasis is perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn, proud sponsors of Gold and Black Radio. Now, the publisher of GoldandBlack.com is our friend Alan Karpick, and he joins us now. Like I'd mentioned, and we had talked about this with Tom, and Tom and Bill had talked about it as well. Purdue's got a decent history, right, in pulling the upset against Ohio State. They come into this matchup at number 3. Unfortunately, Alan, those have largely come at home. In Columbus, a little bit of a different story there.
It has been in Columbus. Bill talked about the fact that the Boilermakers had a shot, and so a guy named Kenny Guyton came off the bench in 2012 and led Ohio State down the field. I think their fight song is across the field, but they went down the field that day and got the 2-point conversion, took the game to overtime, and beat Purdue in 2012. Urban Meyer's undefeated. I think his season on probation, so to speak. The Ohio State wins that game. It's been tough at Ohio State. Purdue in 1999 had a shot at him, didn't get it done in the kind of a rainy day, a couple missed field goals, etc. That was the end of that. But we have to go back to 1988. Ernie Schrumeyer. And I don't know if you were born in 1988, but Ernie came from Mississauga. Is that how you pronounced it? From Ontario. About a 5'8" hot fire hydrant type former punter, but he caught a bunch of balls out of the backfield, and Purdue beats Ohio State 31-26 at the Shoe. That's the last time, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to make a bold statement. It's not going to be this time in 2024. I want to say it. But I did want to add to Brian's thing. It's been, I'm a numbers guy, 36 games in a row for the men's basketball in non-conference play, 26 consecutive November wins. Thanks to Chris Foreman for digging that up for us. But those are the numbers that streak is going on. What a streak it's been.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. For those curious, I was born in 83.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
My first sports memory wasn't until 89. The Knicks won the Atlantic Division Championship. They were the 2 seed. And ended up losing to Michael Jordan's Bulls. It was the year that he hit the shot to beat the Cavs and did the epic celebration, beat the Knicks in the next round. So my first sports memory didn't come in 88. So,
you would have been 5 years old. I apologize for making you younger than you really are. But no, you weren't on the edge of your seat, because I don't even think that game was on TV, if you can believe that, in 1988, that Purdue win over Ohio State.
Now, speaking of history, Alan, which we always like to use you for, this is factually the largest point spread. Is that right? In Purdue history, 38 points.
As far as we can gather, we have a good database that goes back to 1995, but we actually looked it up a little bit deeper. The last time Purdue has been this big, and they have never been this big, but in the 30s, mid-30s, 1974 against Notre Dame. And you know what, Derek? They beat Notre Dame that day.
Wow.
Scoring 24 points in the first quarter. And we now know you weren't born in 1974, but they got 24 points in the first quarter, beat the defending national champion Notre Dame and Ara Parseghian his last year in South Bend, 31-20. They hung on to win that game. Quite the shocker in terms of that. And I think I looked it up. There's only been 3 teams in Division I or FBS college football that have been 40-point or more underdogs. Purdue is approaching that level. It's about the 6th or 7th largest spread that we could find since point spreads began, or at least being publicized in college football.
I wonder if Indiana's in that mix, because
no, I don't think so. Right? Didn't see any Indiana games
right.
in there, but there was a Northwestern game that was a little bit less.
That makes sense. Yeah.
But again, it's stating the obvious. It's pretty darn substantial for that noon kick on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, those old 80s Northwestern teams, right? I remember hearing a story that up in Chicago, they had painted the Highway 94 sign where it said Highway 94 Northwestern 0 underneath.
That's right.
So one of my favorite stories
I think they won one game from 1978 to 82, maybe.
Wow.
It was pretty darn scorched earth up in Evanston, but that program has gotten a little bit better over the years. That's why it was so shocking in 94 when Gary Barnett and company leads Northwestern to the Rose Bowl, but that was for a 30 years ago, if you can believe that.
Yeah, crazy to think. Talking about happy memories, because we're trying to do some happy things when we're talking Purdue football. You've been around this program forever, Alan. Where does that Tyler Trent game in 2018 rank for you?
I don't know that it can be any high. You can have a better game when you think about just the story, and it was just it was live, it was real, and it was magical. And I know it's a sporting event, but everything seemed to transcend it that day. The fact that he's on the corner of the field as they go to win the game. He's a couple months away from his passing. Could, the story, the ESPN game day story on him, if you want to be brought to tears immediately, watch that. It's still one of the great ones. And I think that I don't think I've ever been around an event, and that event carries weight 6 years later, and it will carry weight 20, 30 years later, just because of the magnitude, the humanity that went into that day in Ross-Ade Stadium, that night into Ross-Ade Stadium. And then you put 49 on Urban Meyer, 49-20 win over Notre Dame or over Ohio State. Simply unbelievable.
Yeah, and any upset is great, right? Like I remember the Danny Hope one where he's out with the whistle in the middle of the crowd in 2009. But the fact that not only that it was everything surrounding Tyler Trent, but the fact that they smacked them that night. I mean, they ran them out of Ross-Ade that night.
They did, you kept watching that game if you're a Purdue fan, and you thought, well, wait, the first half they're ahead, but they were in control of that game really. For most of that game. Now they scored a couple late touchdowns with the Marcus Bailey pick six and the DJ Knox long run, just for good measure. But they still were in complete control of the Ohio State team that really thought that they were going to go to the national championship that year, and that set them very far back.
Yeah, well, sadly, we're not expecting a repeat coming up here Saturday night in Columbus, but who knows, right? Never say never, I guess. Let's bring back our pals Brian Neubert and Tom Dienard as we go across the Big Ten. And guys, I'll be honest, I don't see anything on the schedule. I get that it's Michigan and I get that it's Indiana. So you say, well, historically, right? Tom, I think Indiana's going to smack Michigan. They've smacked everybody else that they played, and I think this is a very average Michigan team. They still have some talent. But and maybe sadly is the best team that Indiana has played to this point, just because of the way that the schedule has worked out. But I'm not expecting them to be seriously threatening Bloomington. Am I wrong?
Yeah, you may be right. 14.5-point favorite. One of the last time IU was a 14.5-point favorite against Michigan. But you're right. This isn't a vintage Michigan team. The losses from last year's title team are well documented. Issues at quarterback being at the core of their problems this year. So, yeah, you're right. Most people expect the Hoosiers to cruise. Then, Derek, they've got an off week, and then comes the biggie with Ohio State. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, boy, what a magical season. It continues here down in Monroe County. And you're right. When you look at the slated games this week, it's sort of middling, I guess, is the word that jumps to mind for me. I tell you what, Friday night, though, tonight, right? Iowa at UCLA. The Bruins suddenly have some life, right? They won 2 games in a row, both on the road. I know Iowa's won 2 in a row, but that could be interesting. The Bruins were thought to be one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, but they're showing some life here late in the year under Sean Foster.
Yeah, that has been interesting because when I saw UCLA and Indiana playing that first game, and then I saw UCLA playing their first couple of games, I was like, wow, this team might be the worst team in the Big Ten, and then. Of course, they've been able to bounce back a little bit. But on the other end of the standings, we talked about this last week. Ohio State winning at Penn State now creates a situation where you have 4 contenders in the Big Ten for a playoff spot. Oregon obviously has the most margin for error, right? But Alan, I think this is a beautiful spot, right? In the first year of the 12-team playoff for the Big Ten to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's scripted perfectly because the league now has got this extra in Indiana. I mean, who would have thought? But I mean, we've been saying this all year. But Indiana absolutely deserves to be there, and I don't know how you're going to knock them out, because are they going to lose 2 games? I mean, they may lose to Ohio State, okay. And they will keep them out of the Big Ten championship game, but that's just going to be 1 loss. I don't know. I mean, can they slide their way out? But it is good for the Big Ten. Penn State's got to hang in there and get the job done. But right now, it looks really good to have 4 teams in that college football playoff. And how many will get buys is another thing. But Oregon certainly, or the winner of the Big Ten championship game, one would think would be in that situation. But Indiana going to Knoxville for what was they projected? How amazing that would be. Yeah. What would have been your odds before the season to pick that one, if that ends up coming to fruition?
I'm hell-bent on an 8-9 Indiana Notre Dame game.
That's wouldn't that be great?
I want to see it. I think they actually added, they haven't played in decades. I think they actually added each other in a future schedule, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back.
They played in the 90s.
Yeah. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
I remember that like
Bend, one time in South Bend.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that was the late Mallory years there.
Yeah.
Don't you wonder? You think, first of all, you think the Big Ten is going to get 4 teams in the playoff, number one. Number two, Oregon, Ohio State. Then it becomes a beauty contest between Penn State and Indiana. Again, you kind of wonder if the Big Ten is really going to get 4 teams. Maybe they will. And you start comparing resumes between Penn State and IU. Who, in the end, if they both only have 1 loss, will have the better resume?
Well, and then also you have those automatic. If somebody pulls an upset and wins their league, and gets that can change it, right? And I'm not an expert on this, so it's how it's projected right now. But Tom, I agree with you. It seems to be a lot to get that 4th team in.
Yeah, and Penn State doesn't really have anything that jumps off the paper because USC and Illinois have gone down the tubes. And Wisconsin, I think we'd all agree on this. Wisconsin's a very average team, and that's really kind of what you're hanging your hat on. And plus, Brian, I think the narrative kind of follows around Penn State, doesn't it, at this point? I mean, they blew it. What were they doing in that goal-to-go situation against Ohio State? It just feels like they get in these spots where, okay, they're at home, and this is their opportunity to break through, and then they just fall right on their face.
Yeah, they've got a bit of a rep as the team that just can't get past Ohio State and can't get past Michigan, and that's they certainly earned it. But when you have viral videos of people yelling at James Franklin, it probably doesn't help your brand when that inevitable beauty contest. And I can't claim to be an expert on the process of picking these teams for this playoff, other than what I can tell you for certain is that it's just going to mean instead of number 5 being pissed off, now number 13 is going to be pissed off. And it's somebody good is going to get left out. That's the nature of playoffs. It's the nature of the NCAA tournament. Was the nature of the 4-team playoff. It'll be the nature of the 12-team playoff. And when they go to 20 or whatever the next number is, it'll be the nature of that playoff. So if it comes down to a beauty contest between Penn State and Indiana better be undefeated, or that they better be at 1 loss because, Penn State's got a bigger name, obviously, but Penn State's also got some optics issues itself in the sense that it had its opportunity, to win that one big game. And once again, Charlie Brown tried to kick the football and the football got pulled away at the last instant.
Yeah, and Tom, SMU, I think, is fighting that as well, right? Because people are looking at it and being like, what, SMU? Like, Eric Dickerson's not there anymore. What are we talking about? And they have a really nice resume. They've had a great season.
Yeah, SMU, you're right. Peppermint Patty wouldn't pull the ball away, would you, Brian?
Never.
But yeah, SMU's been a great story. How about BYU? BYU's still unbeaten as well. It'd be fun to see Kalani Sitake get the Cougars in there as well. And you're right. Boy, the Mustangs, the Ponies, that's been a fun story. And the Big 12 guys, what a crazy league that was. A lot of bad losses last weekend in the Big 12. Iowa State going down home. Like I said, it's a conference. Kansas State got beat as well. It'll be interesting to see how that league sorts out, and probably looking like just a one bid league, I would think, at this point.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. We'll be
I don't
looking.
think it was Peppermint Patty who held the football, Tom. I think
it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
My point was, if she was holding the football, she wouldn't do that.
Oh,
more trustworthy.
It was Lucy.
She's better than Lucy.
But I want to say
it should be Pigpen.
Thing. Well, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say it should be Pigpen.
We're running through the roll
No one's
call.
going to try to block the kick then in that little cloud of stink.
I think Woody Hayes was a Pigpen because it was 3 yards in a cloud of dust, right? So that was perfect on that. But this is one thing that I keep thinking about, and Indiana in the college football playoff talk, and I know Purdue couldn't be lower right now than it's been historically. Okay, we can all agree on that. But that shows you that it might be possible. I'm not saying I know I never thought I'd live long enough to see Purdue even in the college football playoff talk. But then again, I truly didn't think I'd see Indiana either. So it's really an interesting thing. I agree with Brian that the teams are going to get left out. And you're right, Tom. I think if you're hinting towards the fact that 4 teams in the Big Ten in the final 12 probably be 1 team too many, but somebody is going to be upset.
Yeah, and I think, Alan, to your point, I think the equalizer for Indiana they've really been able to flex their NIL muscle. And I think that's going to continue going forward here, not just for football, but for all their programs. Yeah. I think they can do some things. They're not Ohio State or Texas, but they're right on that next tier when it comes to that. And they can do some things that, Wake Forest and some other programs aren't able to do. So it'll be interesting to see, though, like how they carry this forward, right? Because obviously you're going to have to keep, speaking of transferring, you're going to have to keep your head coach, right? And Kurt Signetti and building this forward and building upon this, because, a couple of years ago, we saw them kind of break through and then it all crumbled back down. It feels like there's more staying power there this time around, though.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, and if they can't sustain this, Derek. And going back to the Penn State IU beauty contest, you do look at Penn State's resume, and there's not really any meat there at all, right?
No.
You mentioned the win at Wisconsin and maybe a home win against Illinois. Those are the wins you're hanging your hat on. So, so their resume, like you said, doesn't really glow any brighter than Indiana's, and it would be too bad for IU if this does come down to a name brand contest. That certainly shouldn't be the case, but you just never know when you have people selecting teams subjectively sometimes.
And I use style points too. I mean, they've beaten everybody by a ton of points. That too.
They're fun to watch too. They've got a fun offense and they've got a fun defense, and they're playing with a lot of energy and they're playing with a lot of emotion, and the fans are engaged. They'll travel like hell probably. If they struggled early in the year to get people to come to the stadium, but now if they go to a playoff game somewhere, some neutral site, however that works, I think there'll actually be Indiana fans there, which
we'll see what happens.
We experienced with Purdue back in the 90s or back in the early 2000s. But
no doubt about it. We'll keep our eye on all of it, and obviously our attention will be in Columbus, a noon kick tomorrow between Ohio State and Purdue, and you guys can tune into the Saturday simulcast with all of these guys coming up to recap the game when it's all done. Thanks so much, Alan, Tom, Brian. We'll see you next time here on Gold and Black Radio.
Thanks, you, Derek.
And that's it for our Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much for joining us. A final shout out to our sponsors. We want to thank Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans. East End Grill and Ripple and Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn, this Midwestern oasis, perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort. Celebrate all that the wilderness provides this fall and winter at Sand Valley. Start planning your next winter getaway by visiting sandvalleypursuits.com. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. And don't forget to become a subscriber right here at GoldandBlack.com for the absolute best Purdue coverage. Saturday simulcast is the next time that you'll hear from us. Next time you'll have me as Gold and Black Radio coming up on Tuesday, but enjoy the game tomorrow, and we will see you next time right here at GoldandBlack.com.